How inmates cook in solitary confinement. The secrets officers miss. The smoke in the cell. The officer freezes. There's smoke drifting out from under cell 3B, but solitary confinement isn't supposed to have microwaves, stoves, or anything that could even warm water. He steps closer. The smoke grows thicker, and there's a strange smell, not fire, but food. Actual cooked food. Before he can call it in, something inside the cell clatters, metal hitting concrete, followed by a burst of steam that shoots through the food slot. The officer's heart jumps. "How is that even possible?" he whispers. Solitary inmates get nothing. No flames. No heating coils. No metal pots. No appliances. And yet, someone in cell 3B has cooked something hot enough to burn. He slowly opens the food flap. The cell is dim. The inmate sits on the floor, calm, like nothing happened. No smoke. No fire. No tools. Just a small plastic bowl, and the faint smell of noodles and spices. The officer swears he saw smoke. But the inmate looks up and whispers, "I told you, you officers don't see everything." What you're about to learn is one of the strangest, most creative, and most secretive skills in the prison world. How inmates manage to cook inside solitary confinement, using nothing but everyday objects. And the truth is, most people have no idea what really goes on behind those steel doors. The world of a solitary cell. To understand how inmates pull off something as impossible as cooking in solitary, you first have to understand the cell itself. A solitary confinement cell is one of the most controlled, stripped-down environments in any prison in the United States, the UK, or Canada. It's small, it's cold, and it's built to make sure nothing can happen without staff noticing. The average solitary cell has a steel bed frame, a thin mattress, a toilet sink combo, a light that never fully turns off, and walls close enough that you can touch both sides just by stretching your arms. There are no appliances, no outlets inmates can access, no metal silverware. Even pencils are monitored. Meals arrive through a food slot, a plastic tray, cold sandwiches, maybe a scoop of beans or rice. Everything is supposed to be eaten exactly the way it arrives. But in solitary, time moves differently. Hours feel like days. Days feel like weeks. And some inmates, they refuse to accept the idea of living on cold food forever. So they improvise. And over time, their creativity becomes a survival skill. Most officers believe nothing serious can be hidden inside a solitary cell. But prisoners have a rule. If you give a man 4 walls and boredom, he'll figure out how to break at least one. And cooking, as crazy as it sounds, is one of the quiet rebellions of solitary life. They don't do it to cause trouble. They do it because a warm meal feels human. It reminds them of family, of comfort, of normal life outside these concrete walls. Some inmates call it heat therapy. Others call it jailhouse chef mode. Whatever name they use, they've found ways to cook using things that officers walk past every single day. In the next chapter, you'll see how they turn everyday prison items into heat sources that shouldn't be possible. The heat sources officers never expect. The secret to cooking in solitary starts with one rule. If it produces heat, even a little, an inmate can turn it into a kitchen. And inside a solitary cell, there are 3 things that create just enough heat to work with. None of them look dangerous. None of them look suspicious. But together, they become tools officers rarely notice. 1. The hot water tap trick. Every solitary cell has a combined sink and toilet unit. Most people don't know this, but in older and even some newer facilities, the hot water tap gets hotter than expected, sometimes nearly boiling. Not enough to burn metal, but enough to heat food. Some inmates press plastic containers directly under the hot stream, letting it run for minutes at a time. Because water doesn't set off alarms and the cell walls are solid, officers often assume the inmate is just washing up. But what's really happening is slow cooking. Instant noodles soften. Oatmeal thickens. Beans rehydrate. Even rice can be half-cooked. It might take 20 to 30 minutes, but time is something solitary has plenty of. 2. The light fixture method. Solitary lights never fully turn off. That tiny glow at night? It comes from a bulb or panel that gives off a constant low heat. Some inmates wrap food in plastic, then press it against the top of the cell where the light panel sits. It's not enough to fry anything, but over an hour or more, heat spreads through whatever's inside. A folded towel hides the process. To an officer walking by, it just looks like a towel hung to dry. But inside, the meal is warming. This method works especially well with leftover rice, tortillas, and packets of commissary food. Slow, steady, almost invisible. 3. The wire and battery hack. This one is rare and extremely risky. But in some facilities, inmates are allowed to keep battery-powered players or small radios. And wherever there's a battery, there's potential for heat. With foil from chip bags, gum wrappers, or ramen packets, inmates create a thin strip of conductive material. Touching both ends of the foil to each battery terminal creates a small spark, then heat. And heat is all they need. They don't make flames. They don't make explosions. But they can warm up a tiny area enough to heat sauce packets, melt cheese, or soften food. It's dangerous, yes, but it shows how far creativity can go when a warm meal feels like survival. Inside solitary, these methods aren't about breaking rules. They're about staying human. But heat alone isn't enough. Inmates also need containers, tools, and makeshift cookware to make a real meal. In the next chapter, you'll see how they turn basic prison-issued items into a full kitchen, even when everything around them says it's impossible. Turning a solitary cell into a kitchen. Heat is only half of the puzzle. The bigger challenge is what to cook with, because inmates in solitary have almost nothing. No bowls, no pans, no utensils. Everything they get is designed to be as safe and simple as possible. But solitary inmates learn fast. Anything that can hold food becomes cookware. Anything that can stir becomes a utensil. Anything that can contain heat becomes an oven. And what they create is surprisingly effective. 1. The plastic bowl cooking system. Every meal in solitary comes in a plastic tray or bowl. Officers think it's single-use. Inmates treat it like gold. They stack bowls to trap steam. They flip them upside down to use as lids. They poke tiny holes to release pressure without cracking the plastic. 2 bowls stacked together with a towel wrapped around them? That's a makeshift thermal cooker. The heat from the water tap stays trapped inside, slowly cooking whatever's in the bowl. Instant noodles come out soft. Rice absorbs water. Oatmeal becomes thick and warm. Not fancy, but effective. 2. The wet towel pressure method. A soaked towel is one of the smartest tricks in solitary cooking. Here's why. When a towel is wet and wrapped tightly around a bowl, it traps heat exactly like an insulated jacket. Inmates wrap their food bowls and then press them near any heat source. The hot water tap, the light panel, or even their own body heat if they have no other choice. Over 20 to 40 minutes, the food warms enough to taste like a real meal again. It's slow cooking inmate style. 3. The milk carton mini oven. Some prisons give out small cardboard milk cartons. Most people drink them and toss them. But solitary inmates see something different. A box. A container. A potential mini oven. They cut the top open, pack the bottom with wet paper to prevent burning, and place food inside. Then they trap heat using hot water-soaked paper, warm towels, plastic sheets from meal wrappers. It's not an oven that bakes, but it warms food evenly, making it taste cooked. This is especially popular for leftover beans, small rice portions, commissary ramen mixes, canned tuna packets, sauce pouches. It's simple engineering inside one of the toughest environments. 4. The commissary foil skillet. Not every prison allows foil. But those that do, inmates get creative. They fold multiple layers of foil into a flat cooking surface. They keep it small, something that looks like nothing if officers glance through the door. The heat comes from a battery trick or pressing the foil against a warm light panel. Can warm, fish packets, cheese slices, thin noodles, crushed beans. It's not enough to fry anything, but it brings food back to life. Inside solitary, the cell transforms into a kitchen whenever the officers walk away. Quiet, hidden, efficient. But the real magic happens not in the tools, but in the recipes inmates create using almost nothing. The meals no one believes are made in solitary. With nothing but plastic bowls, hot water, scraps of commissary food, and quiet creativity, solitary inmates create meals that shock even former officers. These dishes are simple, but in a world where time stands still, they feel like luxury. Here are the most surprising things inmates actually make behind those steel doors. 1. Sink-boiled ramen deluxe. Ramen is the king of prison cooking. In solitary, inmates elevate it into something far better than the pack suggests. They place the noodles in a bowl, let hot water run directly over them for minutes at a time, then add crushed chips for crunch, any leftover meat from lunch, hot sauce packets, a tiny pinch of seasoning saved from past meals. Stacked bowls trap the steam, creating a slow cooker effect. After 20 to 25 minutes, the noodles are soft, the broth is hot, and the result feels like a full, comforting meal. Inside solitary, this is considered a big deal. 2. Spread burritos. This is one of the most legendary prison meals, and yes, inmates even make it in solitary. They grind up crackers from lunch trays, chips from commissary, beans left over from dinner. They mix everything with hot water and knead it into a thick, dough-like paste called the spread. Then they flatten it out on a plastic sheet and let it dry against the warm cell light. After an hour, they have a tortilla-like wrap. Fill it with tuna, leftover rice, veggie scraps, seasoning packets. Roll it tight. A burrito made in solitary confinement. Something no officer expects. 3. Battery melt nachos. This one always surprises people. If the inmate has access to batteries and foil, they create a tiny heat strip. Not enough to burn, just enough to soften cheese. They line the tray with chips from commissary. Sprinkle seasoning. Add tiny pieces of cheese or leftover food. Then they hold the heated foil strip over the top until the cheese melts slightly. It's risky, but the result tastes like a bite of home. 4. Instant rice bowls. Rice is one of the easiest solitary dishes. Just hot water and time. But inmates go further, adding tuna, soy sauce packets, crushed beans, veggie scraps, a tiny bit of mayo saved from lunch. With towels wrapped around the bowl to trap heat, rice becomes soft and warm in about 40 minutes. Slow. But in solitary, slow is normal. 5. Coffee cake paste. This one isn't cooked, but it's treated like dessert. Inmates crush cookies or biscuits from their trays, mix them with a few drops of coffee, and knead everything into a thick, sweet paste. Then they press it flat inside a plastic bag and place it near the warm light panel to firm it up. It becomes chewy. That's sweet. A dessert inside a place where dessert doesn't exist. For someone living 23 hours a day alone, it can feel like a celebration. These meals represent more than food. They are tiny moments of dignity, normalcy, and comfort inside a world built around silence and control. But cooking in solitary isn't always safe, and when officers finally discover these hidden kitchens, the consequences can be serious. The hiding game: how cooking stays invisible. Cooking in solitary isn't loud. It isn't messy. And it definitely isn't random. It's a system, a careful routine built around timing, observation, silence, and creativity. Because inmates know one thing for sure. Officers search cells. Officers check cameras. Officers listen. So if cooking is going to happen, it has to happen in a way that leaves no traces. This chapter reveals how inmates keep their secret kitchens hidden, often right in plain sight. 1. Cooking during shift changes. Every solitary unit has patterns. Officers rotate. Doors open at predictable times. Meal carts arrive in the same rhythm. Hallway footsteps follow a schedule. Inmates memorize these patterns like a map. They know exactly when the floor is busiest and when it's quiet enough to get away with something. The best time to cook? 5 minutes before shift change. Officers are focused on ending their paperwork, meeting the next team, wrapping up rounds. That small window is enough to warm meals, set up makeshift cookware, or hide bowls under towels. By the time the next officer looks in, Everything looks normal again. 2. Hiding food tools in plain sight. The smartest hiding places are not hidden at all. Inmates tuck cooking items inside. Rolled-up towels. Empty commissary packaging. Soap containers. The space between mattress and bed frame. Inside shoe tongues. Behind clean clothes stacked neatly. Nothing illegal. Nothing sharp. Just bowls, packets, wrappers, and heat-trapping materials tucked away like laundry. An officer sees a clean cell, but the inmate sees a fully stocked kitchen. 3. Steam control, the most important rule. Steam is the enemy. If an officer sees steam, they know heat is involved. So inmates came up with tricks. Wrap bowls in towels to catch condensation. Cook behind the bed so steam sticks to the wall. Use the toilet area where airflow hides moisture. Keep the cell fan running to disperse warmth. The goal is simple. Food gets hot, but the air stays cool. That's how Smoke in the Hook scene happened. An inmate pushed the system too far. Most never do. 4. Cleanup protocol. Once cooking is done, inmates move fast. Wipe bowls dry. Fold towels carefully. Press wrappers flat. Rinse trays until they look unused. Hide seasoning packets under the mattress corner. A good cleanup leaves zero signs that anything happened. To an officer, the cell looks untouched. To the inmate, it looks like a restaurant that just closed for the night. 5. The quiet communication network. Even in solitary, inmates find ways to warn each other. Tapping on walls. Sliding notes under doors. Whispering through vents. Using mirrors to signal officers walking down the tier. If an officer stops unexpectedly or doubles back, inmates send warnings so everyone can shut down instantly. The network is quiet, invisible, but surprisingly effective. Inside solitary, cooking becomes a mix of strategy, timing, and survival. But no matter how careful inmates are, officers eventually notice patterns, odd smells, warm trays, unusual water use. And when officers start catching on, the tension in solitary rises fast. When officers catch on, cooking in solitary is quiet, careful, and almost invisible. But nothing stays hidden forever. And when an officer notices even the smallest detail out of place, the entire atmosphere inside the unit shifts. This is the moment when creativity meets consequences. 1. The smell that changes everything. The earliest sign is almost always the smell. Not smoke, not fire, just something unusual, a mix of noodles, sauce, spices, or melted cheese drifting through the air. Solitary units aren't supposed to smell like food. Meals are cold, simple, and uniform. So when an officer catches a faint scent of warm broth or seasoned rice, they immediately know something's off. They pause at the door. They breathe in again. And even if it's just a hint, they log it mentally for later. Once an officer starts paying attention, the inmate has entered dangerous territory. 2. The water usage flag. In many prisons, officers track patterns. How long the sink runs. When the toilet flushes. How much water is used per shift. If the hot water runs unusually long, 5, 6, 7 minutes straight, it's a red flag. Some officers assume an inmate is just washing up. But others know the truth. Long-running water almost always means cooking. So they take note, mark the cell on their clipboard, and return later when the inmate least expects it. 3. Sudden cell searches. A cell search in solitary is different from general population. There's no warning. No time to hide anything. Officers open the door while inmates are cuffed, and they examine everything. Mattress seams, trash bags, towel stacks, commissary wrappers, food trays, clothes pockets, corners of the sink. They look for signs of heat, residue, unusual moisture, or improvised cookware. Even one wet towel in the wrong place can lead to questions an inmate doesn't want to answer. Sometimes the search finds nothing. Sometimes it finds everything. And sometimes, officers walk away knowing something is happening even if they can't prove it yet. 4. The officer who notices patterns. Every solitary unit has at least one officer who pays attention to details. The officer who remembers which inmate always eats fast. And which one returns trays still warm? The officer who knows that cell 2B hasn't asked for extra napkins in months, but suddenly wants them every day. Small differences matter. A pattern change can expose an entire hidden kitchen. This officer doesn't accuse, doesn't yell, doesn't even react. They just watch. And in solitary, being watched is the most dangerous part. 5. When an inmate is finally confronted. The confrontation rarely starts with shouting. It usually begins with a calm sentence through the food slot. Your cell smells different today. You've been running your water a lot lately. Just that one line is enough to raise the tension in a cell instantly. The inmate freezes. They say nothing. They know what comes next. A search, a write-up, or worse, losing commissary for weeks. But officers also know something else. A warm meal is not a weapon. It's not an escape tool. It's usually just a sign of an inmate trying to feel normal for a moment. So consequences vary. Some officers simply warn them. Others confiscate bowls or wrappers. A few issue formal discipline. But the biggest consequence isn't punishment. It's losing the one outlet that made solitary feel less empty. When an inmate loses their cooking setup, they go back to cold meals and silent hours. Yet something interesting happens next. They start planning again. New hiding places. New ideas. New ways to recreate warmth inside steel walls. Because for many solitary inmates, cooking isn't rebellion, it's survival. Why cooking matters in a place built to break you. Inside solitary confinement, time slows until it barely feels real. The walls don't move. The lights never fully turn off. And the quiet becomes so heavy it feels like a second layer of air pressing down. In that kind of environment, small routines become lifelines. Cooking, even in the simplest, safest, most makeshift way, becomes more than food. It becomes a way to stay grounded. A way to control something in a place built around control. A reminder of normal life. A connection to family memories. A break from the emptiness. When an inmate mixes seasonings, warms noodles, or creates a tiny meal from scraps, they're not just feeding their stomach. They're feeding their mind. Some inmates say it helps them think clearer. Some say it makes the day go faster. Others say it reminds them they're more than a prisoner number, they're still human. In solitary, where nearly everything is taken away, a warm meal becomes a quiet act of strength. And while officers might never see the full meaning behind it, inmates know exactly what they're doing. They're keeping a small part of themselves alive. The unseen humanity behind the steel doors. Solitary confinement is often shown as a place of punishment, silence, and strict order, and in many ways, it is. But behind every locked door is a person trying to get through one more day. Cooking becomes a symbol of hope in a place with no windows to the future. Creativity where choices are limited. Resilience inside the tightest restrictions. Humanity inside one of the harshest corners of the system. Guards may walk past the cells seeing only concrete, steel, and routine. But inside, inmates create tiny islands of comfort, small reminders that they're still alive, still thinking, still trying. These meals don't break rules with violence. They don't threaten safety. They simply show something most people never see. The human mind can adapt to anything, even the smallest, coldest room in the prison. And it adapts not just to survive, but to find meaning. The secret they can't take away. Take a final look back at that moment from the hook. The smoke. The unexpected smell. The inmate sitting on the floor with nothing but a plastic bowl. The officer whispering, "How is that even possible?" Now you know the truth. It wasn't magic. It wasn't danger. It wasn't rebellion. It was resourcefulness. It was creativity. It was someone trying to feel warm in a cold world. Inside solitary confinement, inmates cook not to break the system, but to hold onto the one thing the system can never fully remove. Their humanity. And that's the secret officers miss. Not the cooking, not the heat sources, not the tools, but the truth behind it. A warm meal can keep hope alive in a place designed to take hope away. Fade out on the steel door. The light hums. The hallway echoes. And behind the glass, Another inmate quietly prepares their next hidden meal. Not out of defiance, but out of the simple need to feel human for one more day.